Good morning, Nugget. Welcome to the A-10C conversion training course. Over the next few days, we'll teach you to fly and fight in the latest incarnation of the toughest, meanest, and ugliest jet in the Air Force inventory, the A-10C Thunderbolt II, better known as the Warthog or simply the Hog. In this brief introduction, we'll overview the A-10 and take a quick glance inside the cockpit. Please do not touch any input controls while watching this lesson. You can press the pause key on your keyboard if you need a break. Your jet's waiting on the ramp, so let's get to it. The A-10C is the latest upgrade to the venerable A-10 Thunderbolt II close air support attack aircraft. The A-10 has been around since the 1970s, and despite efforts to kill it off earlier, the Hog plays a vital role in U.S. military operations around the world today. Its original mission was to kill Soviet tanks streaming through the Fulda Gap, but today it's perhaps the most effective weapon in Iraq and Afghanistan. Long loader times, large weapon loads, redundant systems, and powerful sensors make the Hog a favorite of pilots and ground troops alike. Let's take a look at some of the key features of the A-10C. The A-10 has a pair of straight wings that provide excellent lift and maneuverability at slow speeds. However, these same wings contribute to the A-10 being a bit of a slowpoke. The wings have large trailing edge flaps, 11 stations for stores loading, and large fuel tanks. The fuselage also holds a pair of fuel tanks, but was largely built around the massive GAL-8A Avenger 7-barrel 30mm cannon. Two engines are mounted externally high on the rear fuselage. Flight control is provided by large ailerons on the wings, twin elevators on the tailplane, and rudders on the vertical stabilizers. All these control surfaces have backup systems that keep the A-10 flying even after severe battle damage. The flight control system uses a combination of hydraulic and mechanical linkages run through the stability augmentation system that make the A-10 a very controllable and stable aircraft to handle. Two TF-34GE100A turbofan engines are mounted high on the rear fuselage. These engines are fuel efficient, durable, and can take a lot of damage. The unusual position masks the engines from enemy heat-seeking sensors, minimizes the risk of foreign object and battle damage to both engines, and makes them easier to service. The A-10 also has an auxiliary power unit that can be used to start the engines and run the electrical and hydraulic systems on the ground. Let's take a look inside the A-10C's office. This has received quite a facelift since the A-10A. The first noticeable difference is the pit is dominated by two 5x5-inch multifunction color displays. A new control stick borrowed from the F-16 and a right throttle handle from the F-15E are installed to increase HOTAS functionality. An upfront controller below the heads-up display is used for data entry, and the Armament HUD control panel has replaced the older Armament control panel for combat systems configuration. The pit can be divided into the four primary areas: the HUD and canopy valve, the front dash, the left console, and the right console. We'll be using these references in later missions. Like the rest of the aircraft, the cockpit was designed to withstand battlefield punishment. The pilot and control links are surrounded by a 408 kilogram titanium bathtub to protect against shrapnel and AAA fire. This concludes the overview of the A-10C. We'll begin taking a more thorough look at the aircraft starting with the next lesson. But now you've got a mandatory date with the Warthog flight manual, so get busy reading. throttle to maintain airspeed above 200 knots. In this flight, we will overview the primary controls in the cockpit used to work with the various flight and combat systems of the A-10C. If you find it hard to hear my instructions, exit the mission and lower the world and in-cockpit sound sliders to about 50%. You can pause the mission at any point by pressing the pause key on your keyboard. You can also set the mission to active pause mode by pressing left shift plus left click plus pause key. To exit the mission at any point, press the escape key. You can use the numpad keys to pan the view around and press the numpad asterisk and numpad / keys to zoom in and out. Press the spacebar key when you are ready to begin.
Warning, autopilot.
The A-10C utilizes hands-on throttle and stick HOTAS controls to allow the pilot to manipulate primary avionics controls without taking the hands off the stick and throttle. This saves time and eases the pilot's workload. but it also means the stick and throttle feature a lot of buttons that require practice to use effectively. In addition, the A-10C cockpit is designed to minimize the time the pilot spends head down to work the avionics. Many of the displays and avionics controls are presented on the upper part of the cockpit, where the pilot needs to only glance down to find the necessary control or display information. Press the spacebar key to proceed when ready. Let's review the HOTAS controls available on the stick and throttle. Buttons and switches on the control stick include two-stage gun trigger, weapons release button, master mode control button, MMCB, target management switch, TMS, data management switch, DMS, countermeasure switch, CMS, nose wheel steering button, NWS, aircraft trim control hat. On the dual throttle, buttons and switches include mic switch, speed brake switch, boat switch, China hat switch, coolie switch, slew control, autopilot button, pinky switch. While we will use some of these controls as part of this lesson, there will not be enough time to practice with all of them. You will need to reference the aircraft documentation for a complete diagram of the HOTAS, as well as the keyboard shortcuts for all of the commands. Our goal today is to understand the fundamental concept of HOTAS control in the A-10C, and not the many functions of all of the buttons and switches. Press the spacebar key to proceed when ready. The cockpit includes three primary displays: the head-up display HUD on the top of the cockpit frame, and the left and right multifunction color displays MFCDs on the front panel. The MFCDs feature 20 option select buttons, OSB, around each display, starting with OSB 1 in the upper left corner and moving around the display clockwise. The function of each OSB is identified on the screen and depends on the page being displayed. OSBs 11 through 15 at the bottom of each MFCD set the primary page of the display. Press the spacebar key to proceed when ready. Because the avionics package of the A-10C is quite complex and features a number of different systems, it's impossible to include an individual HOTAS button on the stick and throttle to cover all the necessary controls. This problem is overcome by designating a sensor of interest, SOI, which allows the pilot to set which sensor he wishes to command with the HOTAS. The SOI can be set between the HUD and either MFCD page by the pilot as necessary at any point using the coolie switch on the throttle. All HOTAS commands in the cockpit are provided a keyboard alternate. In the case of the coolie switch, these will be H for coolie left, K for coolie right, U for coolie up, and J for coolie down. Before trying to use these commands, it's also important to remember that some HOTAS commands, including the coolie switch, have a different function depending on whether they are pressed and released quickly, short press, or held down for a couple of seconds, long press. Press the spacebar key to proceed when ready. The right MFCD is currently displaying the targeting pod TGP page. The TGP is set to standby mode at mission start. To begin exploring HOTAS controls, let's first set the TGP to air-to-ground mode, AG, by pressing OSB 2 on the right MFCD.